Canada is an amazing country. As the second largest country in the world, it is a land with vast areas of remote, untouched beauty. Many discover that traveling throughout Canada is almost like traveling throughout the world without a passport. As its landscapes vary, so do its people. Canadians consider themselves a mosaic of people because they represent every culture and religious group from around the world. In fact, Canada was the first country in the world to acknowledge as policy its unique diversity of culture as an important part of Canadian identity. Of the 33 million Canadians, Muslims make up approximately 650,000. It is a faith community which represents over 50 different cultures from around the world. Islam has become Canada's principal non-Christian religion. About 1/3 of all Muslim Canadians were born here, and 60% of Muslims are Canadian citizens. Most are working age and contribute far more to the social security system than draw from it. The Muslim community in Canada also has a uniquely high level of university graduates. Official records show that the first Muslims to settle in Canada came in the mid-1800s, before Confederation. In 1854, the Muslim population totaled 3. At the turn of the century, there were only 47, and for the next 50 years, the Muslim population remained in the hundreds. It was not until after World War II that the Muslim community in Canada started growing in the thousands and 10,000s. Between 1971 and 1981, after the Multicultural Act was introduced and a more inclusive immigration policy, the Muslim community tripled in number. Although it's the fastest growing religion in Canada today, Islam is also perhaps the most misunderstood. Islam is closely linked to the Judeo-Christian tradition. Muslims believe in one God and in the final scripture, the Quran, which was revealed and taught by the Prophet Muhammad over 1400 years ago. In this episode, we'll look at the lives of some Canadian Muslims and their significant contributions to Canada. In 1992, several states, including Bosnia-Herzegovina, declared independence from Yugoslavia. For the next 3.5 years, Muslims and Croats living in Bosnia became the victims of a systematic ethnic cleansing campaign towards the establishment of a greater Serbia. Such persecution and displacement of people due to religious intolerance had not been seen in Europe since World War II. In that same year, Alan Okanovic and his sister managed to flee Bosnia. They lived with their aunt in Slovenia for 2 years as refugees under the care of the Slovenian Red Cross. Finally, in August of 1994, both Alan and his sister were granted admission to Canada as landed immigrants. Alan's traumatic experience as a refugee inspired him to devote his life to helping others. In 2001, only 7 years after his immigration to Canada, Alan decided to raise money for children of war-torn countries by successfully cycling across Canada. Today, Alan continues to advance the humanitarian cause by working for the Canadian Red Cross.
And I came from Bosnia with my sister. We had to leave Bosnia because of war, and then we spent 2 years in Slovenia in refugee camp from 1992 to 1994. And then in 1994 we came to Canada as immigrants. We decided to move to Calgary because we already have had some families or distant relatives that live here. So they told us if we come here, it'll be easier for us, especially for the first year or two, we were very homesick. It was very hard for us to be here as a new immigrants. After 3 years of living in Canada, I got married. I always dreamed to help my parents, especially coming to Canada and making more money, much more than you would make in Bosnia. So this gave me opportunity to help them as well. And 4 years ago, my parents came to Canada. I sponsored them, me and my wife, and we lived together since they came. My dad and mom, they don't speak much English, and my dad managed to learn a little bit of English. He found a job, and he's totally independent financially, and and or any other way. So I'm very proud of them. My dad also takes English second language classes every Monday and Wednesday. I personally told him, don't take it, you're too busy with your full-time job. But he refused. He said, no, I will take it as long as I can. My mom, as I said, she's diabetic. And her health, just imagine being a week without medication in Canada. It's very hard. Well, in Bosnia, she was for 4 or 5 years without basic medication because of war. And when she came to Canada, she was in very weak health condition. She's in much better condition now. She takes all the necessary medication. She doesn't take insulin, by the way. And she's doing stationary bike every day, and she's very strict to her diet. My wife, she's not here, she's working. She also came from Bosnia. She lost her father in Bosnian War. He was found in mass grave and recognized by a forensic team. Before working in a Red Cross office, as an immigrant, I was doing any kind of work while learning English language, which was cleaning offices, restaurants, painting, construction. And I learned so many things, and I always dreamed about the time when I'm gonna do my own place. Being in Canada and getting my first own, we're very excited about it. To us, it's an accomplishment. It's pride for us.
The experience of war and of being a refugee has had a tremendous impact on Alan's life, to the extent that he works and volunteers with organizations helping the needy throughout the world. Alan is pursuing a career with the Canadian Red Cross. His humanitarian work, however, began with a Muslim charity called Human Concern International. In 1997, Alan rode his bike 7,000 kilometers across Canada in a fundraising effort to help children of war-torn countries.
When I was a refugee, this was the time when maybe you didn't have, you lost your parents, or you lost the hope. You don't know what's tomorrow is gonna bring you, so you just live day by day. So I really wanna help those people. I never actually thought about doing this work before, and it all started with my cycle across Canada, where I decided to do this marathon and raise money for children of war-torn countries. When I was at St. John, Newfoundland, and I started from Atlantic Ocean, and it was Canada Day. When they saw my van and me getting ready for my first tough day of cycling, they just opened up their purses and they started giving me donations. So this really inspired me, and also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped me on this very tough trip. Then I had a chance to go to refugee camp in southern Russia, in Chechnya, where 22,000 refugees live in one huge refugee camp or tent city. That was the most challenging time for me, to actually see these refugees and people that have no future, sometimes not even a hope. And in one tent you would find 2-3 families, and the only organizations, only people that help them are helping them are humanitarian organizations, and the rest of the world forgot about Chechen refugees. And this is why I was proud to actually go there and sit by them and talk to them and tell them that no, we didn't forget about you guys, and we'll do our best, what we can, to help you, and inshallah, one day you can go home.
Helping others also has a religious significance for Alan.
In fact, Red Cross helps me to become even better Muslim, because according to our religion, if you help one man, you save the whole humanity, and if you kill one man, it's like killing the whole humanity. So it doesn't say helping Muslim, it says helping men. So it could be everybody. So to me, working at such a place, which is Canadian Red Cross, every day I'm better and better Muslim, and I know that each time I press the button on keyboard, I know I did good work that will be recognized hereafter.
Alan Okanovich and Mr. Salim Haji share a common experience, and that both their homelands were torn apart by civil war. In the early part of the 1990s, Canada became home to a growing number of Bosnian and Somalian refugee communities. The transition to Canadian life for most newcomers is one of difficulty and challenge. For most refugees who are forced to leave their home against their will, there's always the desire to return home. Ontario has now become the home to the largest Somali community outside of Somalia, East Africa. Ottawa alone has more than 10,000 Somalis. Most are refugees, and most share a common faith in Islam. Among them are Mr. and Mrs. Haji and their 4 children. On the eve of political and civil strife, Mr. and Mrs. Haji chose to leave Somalia, immigrating to Canada in 1988. Back in Somalia, Mr. Salim Haji worked for the Ministry of Planning's Central Statistics Department. He was head of their computer section, the first of its kind in Somalia. However, coming to Canada and reclaiming a similar position was not an easy task.
There are some difficulties, in facing the Somali, refugees that they come here. The first, problem is, in getting out of Somalia. Everybody knows that there is no security in Somalia. The people live and run, for their life. Some of them, their parents were killed in front of their eyes, and some of them they were raped. Some fathers, their daughters were raped in front of their eyes. So all this, happened, during the Civil War. The people, when they left there and they came to Canada, nobody wants to talk about that, because it reminds them, the things that happened.
Leaving and being forced out of one's home is only the beginning of a long, hard struggle for refugees. It often takes years of traveling from country to country, living as a displaced person before a refugee finds a new home. The Somali refugees that come to Canada must learn to speak a new language and to adapt to a very different culture and climate. Often, it is a challenge just to find a job.
They ask the Canadian experience to get a job, and you have to start somewhere. So from where you get the experience, if everybody tells you we need a Canadian experience, that's the problem. The problem that the immigrants facing, in this country. Some of them, they get depressed. They have to go on welfare because they can't find a job. They have to go to welfare to support them, and nobody nobody likes to go to welfare. But once they get a footstep in a job, they work very hard and they prove themselves.
As a new immigrant arriving in Canada during the recession in 1990, Mr. Haji found it very difficult to find a job. The only opportunity he had in attaining some Canadian work experience was to enroll in an adult education centre, which offered a job placement program in his field of study. After working free for 2 months with the program, his position was eventually made permanent.
And they extended my contract again and again until I got a permanent position at Statistics Canada. And since 1991, February, I am working at Statistics Canada. I'm a senior program analyst, and Alhamdulillah, I'm raising my family, and I'm happy.
Mr. and Mrs. Haji have 4 children who've grown up in Canada. Their experiences and struggles adapting to Canadian culture are very different than those of their parents.
School was really tough on me, especially the whole English, learning English. I remember this one experience I had in recess where a boy had tricked me to open my mouth, and when I opened my mouth, he spit in my mouth. And I remember going to the teacher and trying to explain to the teacher what happened to me, but it was so difficult, and that was super frustrating. And my sister learned English a lot faster than I did.
Then when you come here, it's like everyone's wearing shorts and everyone's doing this and just trying to fit in and stuff. Like it went from us being completely speaking Arabic fluently, being able to read the Quran because we knew Arabic so well, to I think within like 6-7 months, like we just lost it, begging our mom for like those clothes and those toys and speaking English at home because, you know, we knew that we had to be like everybody else, you know, and my mom would just be like, speak your language, and we didn't want to because we wanted to fit in so badly, like to, otherwise you just, you know, get terrorized at school, which never happened because we worked so hard to just assimilate. I don't remember anything about, like, I have little memories of, like, knowing the Arabic. Like, I see my books and stuff and, like, the writing, and I'm like, wow, I knew Arabic. Like, I knew how to write in Arabic, and now it's like you're completely Canadian. Like, you don't remember that life. It's just, you're thinking, who is that person? Who is that child who came here?
For Mr. Haji, preserving his culture and religion by passing them on to his children is an important part of living in Canada.
The people, when they came to Canada, they actually put more, you know, like effort, you know, in the Islam, because they, you know, like in Somalia, it's a Muslim country, and then, you know, like you have, you know, a mosque everywhere. They hear, you know, the adhan every 5 times a day. People automatically, you know, like keep their religion. But when they came to Canada, they're scared. They say, okay, we are minority in here, and we have to keep our deen, you know, like the ladies, they wear, you know, like the veil, the hijab. Some people, they never wear it in Somalia. They take their kids to Sunday schools, you know, at night. In the middle of the winter, it's snowing.
At home, you have one world. Like, your parents are a certain way, they're Muslim, they're Somali. But then when you go outside, like, as soon as you step out of the door, it's completely different. And it's like you have to keep changing who you are a little bit. Well, that's how it was when we were in high school, but now, like, the older you get, I think the easier it is to, like, you get that wisdom to know how important it is.
Like many immigrants and refugees, Salim Haji has many expectations for his children and other Somali youth.
Now they're going through the Canadian system, you know, like the Canadian education, and hopefully they'll have, you know, better, you know, and chance than the older generation.
It's really tough because I don't know how I can, because I feel like sometimes my role as a Muslim woman clashes with what I'm expected to do in school. Like, I mean, I'm supposed to go to school, you know, have a career, and then, like, what then? Like, I want to have a family, like, I want to have children, and I don't know when that's going to happen. Like, when I'm done school, when I'm 30, is that when it's going to begin?
Sometimes it feels impossible, but then we talk to our parents, and they're like, no, you can do it. There's always a way, you know what I mean? Like, if you just ask Allah, He'll, like, help you find a road to just accomplish everything you need to accomplish, but still be a good Muslim and still have the family that you want to have and be the mother that you want to be, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, but it's just, it feels impossible sometimes.
Dr. Taysir Abdul Nasser is one woman who definitely challenges the status quo of Muslim women and women in general. She's one of the first women in Canada to ever be appointed Dean of Engineering at a Canadian university. In 1977, after just 3 months of being married, Dr. Abdul Nasser and her husband moved to Canada from Egypt. She studied for 8 years at Queen's University, achieving both her master's and PhD in engineering. Following that, she took a position at the University of Ottawa and eventually was appointed Dean of the Faculty of Engineering in 1998. Since that time, she has received the YWCA Woman of Distinction Award and has been elected 2 fellowships, one from the Engineering Institute of Canada and the other from the Canadian Academy of Engineering. Family has always been an important part of Dr. Abdul Nasser's life. Back home in Egypt, she was highly influenced by the educational standards set by her family. Here in Canada, she is a devoted wife and a mother of 3.
I'm an electrical engineer by training, and I've been a professor at the University of Ottawa for a number of years. Now I'm currently the dean of the faculty, so I'm more on the management side of education, if you want, but I'm still continuing my research in digital signal processing.
Like many immigrants to Canada, Dr. Abdul Nasser brings a wealth of knowledge, skill, and expertise, enriching our country's cultural and intellectual diversity. Egypt has a long tradition of education. It is the place where Dr. Abdul Nasser formed the foundation of her beliefs.
Egypt itself, from a historical point of view, when you think of history compared to Canada, when people here talk about something that's 200 years old, they think it's old, and in Egypt you've got to be 5,000 years old and more to be considered to be historical. So there's certainly the concept of history and the timeline is very, very different, and there is no question that the system of education over there is very, very well established. Education was of paramount importance for us, so we were expected to do the best we could and to go for, all of us had to have PhDs or else type of a thing. So it was really something that was very strongly encouraged and valued, and it was something that I certainly enjoyed. There has never been the question of me being a woman and anybody telling me why should you go into engineering, despite what people think. It was an option that was open for me just as it is for any other guy in there. There was really no difference. So it wasn't a debate for me, should I go into engineering as a woman or shouldn't I go? It was something I liked, I wanted to do, I had the marks for it and I went into it. So it wasn't such a huge struggle. And for the 5 years, engineering in Egypt is 5 years, and the 5 years I was there at the university, it never was an issue that I am a female in engineering. And we weren't a majority, but we certainly were not a small minority. I started to realize that it is an issue when I came here to Canada. In my very first visit to the family doctor, and the nurse was trying to be quite friendly and pleasant, and she was asking me where I came from and so on, and what did I do. And when I said I was studying for my master's at Queen's at the time in electrical engineering, she took a physical step back and said, why on earth would you do something like that? That was in the 70s. And that was the first time I started realizing that there is an issue in engineering, and I realized that in Canada. I never had that issue in Egypt as a woman in engineering at all. I'm extremely proud of the education I got over there. I never felt that I was at any kind of disadvantage. I came in, I did very well, and until now, people coming in from Egypt to do their graduate studies in our faculty, for example, are by far generally considered to be very good students.
As a Muslim woman and as Dean of Engineering, Dr. Abu Nasr defies stereotypes. Actually, Muslim women in positions of leadership have a long tradition in Islam, dating back more than 1400 years ago to the life of the Prophet Muhammad.
And when I look at my religion, I don't find anything in it that tells me that I'm any less than anybody else. The examples I repeatedly use are Khadija, the wife of the Prophet, for example. This was a businesswoman. He worked for her. She didn't work for him. He worked for her, and you're talking 1400 years ago. And then she proposed to him. For me to think of the concept of having a woman propose to a man 1400 years ago who works for her and who's also 15 years her junior, that if people talk about being a feminist and so on, presumably I would argue that she would fit as one of those feminist people, and she is a very, very highly regarded person in our religion. I look at Aisha, his wife as well. Half of what every Muslim should learn is going to end up coming through narrations that she has said about things that happened with the Prophet. And for me, that is the highest testimony that you can give to anybody if you're saying half of the religion comes from one individual and that individual happens to be a woman. And there is a number of incidents after that where women took very high leadership positions in scholarship. I think the problem is that we tend to not acknowledge that and not highlight that, and it gets buried under a lot of other things, and then you have to sort of make the effort to reestablish it every time.
Dr. Abu Nasr's most influential role model has always been her mother. Also an educator, her compassionate conduct with her students is remembered and followed by her daughter.
My father was a medical doctor and my mother was a school teacher and the principal. She certainly was the one that had the most influence from a discipline and integrity point of view and recognition that whatever it is you do within the context of society and you sort of owe people around you. See, she taught elementary school kids and middle school. All the things that she was doing with her kids are coming back, and I'm trying to do the same thing over here. There was a sense of commitment on her side and sort of a tremendous sense of respect for the profession of teaching in general, and that I know very well. I carried from her, and the responsibility towards the people and wanting to make sure that the students, when they see you 5 or 6 or 10 years down the road, you are not embarrassed to see them, and they're looking, you can look them up in the eye and be proud of what you have contributed to their education. So from that perspective, that part of her profession in Egypt has stayed with me all the way because of the fact that I am in a very similar field, and I take it very, very seriously over here.
Through the influence of her mother and her cultural and religious background, Dr. Abu Nasr hopes to bring a greater social conscience to the profession of engineering.
My religion expected me to be a responsible person, to be the best person I possibly can, to use whatever God has given me to benefit the society around me as much as I could. And if what God gave me was something to do with engineering, then that's where I can contribute, and this is where I will contribute. It's very important for me to make sure that the students that graduate from this faculty recognize the social responsibility they have as professional engineers or professional engineers in the future. And the computer science people that graduate, again, recognize the responsibility they have. The technology they have at their fingertips can do good and can do bad, and they have to make the choice. And at the same time, they have to recognize that they are much more fortunate than a whole lot of other people by virtue of the degree they have, and they have to be aware that at some point in time it will be their turn to give back. And that is something that we have been pushing on the students and the faculty for quite a while now.
Dr. Shima Khan belongs to a growing community of second-generation Muslims living in Canada. Each day, she struggles with the difficulties of balancing her career, her family, and her social activism. In 1965, Dr. Khan moved to Canada from India with her parents. She was only 3. She was raised in Montreal with her Canadian-born brother and sister speaking French, English, and Urdu. During her time as a graduate student of chemical physics at Harvard University in the United States, she rediscovered her faith through personal study and investigation. However, much of what she was learning from the Islamic Society of Harvard at the time was based more in cultural practices. In many cases, what she was learning completely contradicted the true teachings of Islam, particularly in the area of Muslim women. Today, Dr. Khan is a consultant for one of Canada's leading intellectual property law firms, Smart, Bigger, and Featherstoneoff. She is a working mother of 3 and is currently on maternity leave. But despite her demanding career and her family life, she is also the voluntary chair of the Council of American Islamic Relations Canada. CARECAN is an Ottawa-based nonprofit agency providing a voice to the Muslim community in the areas of political advocacy, media relations, and human rights.
The challenges involved in pursuing a career, raising a family, and maintaining one's sanity are challenges that many women across the world face. And first of all, it's not the idea of a superwoman. You have to have your partner, your husband. I mean, it's both of you who are raising the kids. It's not just the mother. And as far as pursuing a career, it's a juggling act, and you need a supportive husband. And alhamdulillah, that's what we have. So I don't see myself as doing this. This is something that we are doing, for ourselves, for our kids, for our own personal fulfillment, and trying to help the community as well.
All right. Good, Ziad. The other way. The other way. Go. Keep going.
A few of the challenges that people of faith, Muslims, Christians, Jews, and other groups face is maintaining that identity for their children. We live in what we call a secular world, in the sense that there is no predominant religion. And if anything, the public face of religion is something which is not very common here. We also live in an era of media images, which propagate values which are so contrary to some of the very core values of Islam, with regards to family, relations between the genders, personal behavior. And so the biggest challenge is to instill in your children those values of family, of worship of God, of remembering God, respecting your elders.
In Islam, the family is the foundation of a child's knowledge and view of the world. For many Muslims, the family imparts a strong cultural identity. Sometimes, however, this identity may contradict Islamic values and beliefs. Like most second-generation Muslims growing up in Canada, Dr. Khan went through the process of understanding the difference between culture and religion.
I started to veil myself, and my family thought it was part of Arab culture. They refused to accept that it was part of Islamic belief. It's by going to the Quran and to the basic teachings of Islam that I found a complete disconnect. So many things that I had been taught about, supposedly which were Islamic, were cultural, and many times they went against what the Quran has enjoined. The promising thing is that women here have access to authentic Islamic knowledge, books, scholars, and they're learning They're learning that many of the things that perhaps their mothers didn't know about what rights they have economically, with regards to education, with regards to choosing who they marry. I mean, these are revolutionary ideas when we speak within our cultures. If people would like to know Islam, I suggest they go to the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Then they can see how far short many Muslim societies follow that. Now, there's a wide disparity, very wide disparity.
Dr. Khan's religious journey has led her to take a pioneering role in the Canadian arm of the Council for American Islamic Relations. CARECAN has a twofold purpose. One, to give the broader North American community an understanding of the religion and practice of Islam. And two, to educate Muslims about their religious, civic, and social duties.
The work at CARE is important because there has been a long-felt need to have a voice, many voices, from within the community to A, respond to the many distortions about our faith and who we are, and B, to provide perspectives, alternate perspectives to current discourses about politics, world events. We're not out there to do a makeover of behavior which should be condemned. We will never stand up for acts which are done in the name of Islam, which are entirely reprehensible. We want to educate Muslims about how the media works, how to go about correcting things, and also to know their own duties. That the Quran tells us, stand up for justice, even if it's against yourselves. And we try to remind Muslims about that.
Regardless of the challenges Dr. Khan faces in her family life, her career, and in her community activism, she always finds strength in her faith.
First, internally, I have a very good sense of, if you like, inner peace. As any mother will tell you with kids, I mean, you rack your brains, pull your hair or your veil, trying to keep everything under control. And as long as you have that inner calm, I mean, that's the most important thing. So that's been the most important aspect of facing whatever I face, either as a mother or in my profession at work, or as a volunteer with our organization, CARECAN. So that's been extremely significant. And with that inner faith, if you like, the practical aspects of praying every day, 5 times a day, fasting during the month of Ramadan, these all enhance this. And the biggest has been the Quran encourages us to remember Allah, and you do that silently. And I think that's been the biggest boon.
It might be hard to imagine that someone who's received numerous awards, like the Best Doctors in Canada 10 years in a row, or the prestigious Order of Canada in 1997 for tireless and groundbreaking research in Parkinson's disease, got his start in a small farming village in Pakistan. But Dr. Ali Rajput's strong sense of determination eventually led him to the United States, where he decided to study neurology, with the intention of returning to Pakistan to fill a void in the medical society. But plans changed, and Dr. Rajput found himself immigrating to Canada in 1966 to study neuropathology. In 1967, he agreed to accept a position as lecturer at the University of Saskatchewan, Faculty of Medicine in Saskatoon, where he's remained for over 30 years. He's worked tirelessly in his community as a dedicated doctor, while at the same time establishing himself as an international leader in the area of Parkinson's disease research. Of course, his success wouldn't have been possible without the constant support of his wife Carla and his children Alex and Rachel, also both successful professionals. In fact, his son has chosen to follow in his father's footsteps. Dr. Alex Rajput also works at the University of Saskatchewan and is quickly becoming a respected neurologist and researcher in his own right.
I was born in a little village which was about 150, 200 people. And these were all people who had migrated from one part of India to another part of India. It was at that time India. They were given homestead. When they were given 32 acres of land, they thought they were big landlords, so they came there. So I finished high school in 1951. 50 years, there was only one person who had finished high school. So it was not a very educationally oriented town. I was only 23 years old when I finished medicine. I didn't have even furniture. My brother, older brother, he made me some got me some examining tables made, some chairs made. The first 2 months of the practice was total disaster. Absolutely, I would have paid people to come and see me, but there was nobody coming to see me. I was the only qualified doctor. There were some quacks in town, and they let it be known, oh yeah, he may have a qualification, but he doesn't have an experience. And they used to call me that boy doctor. There were many who I didn't charge because they were from the village that I was born in. I said, you are my uncle distantly, you are my cousin distantly, I won't charge you. And you have worked for my father, you worked for my brother, I won't charge you. And they would get upset, and I say, if you're upset, you go somebody else, but I'm not going to charge you, that's it, period. But the people who I didn't know and who I knew couldn't afford to pay, that was the hardest thing to do. How do I tell them I don't want to charge you? So I would make all kinds of excuses. I'm not really doing very much for you, and this medicine that I'm getting is coming really free, or whatever excuses. Sometimes I'll tell lies, About that time, I got a letter from a friend who was my classmate and who had then moved to the States. And he said, you were a bright student, you shouldn't be really just wasting your life there being a general practitioner in that little village. I wrote him back, I said, I'm not going to go to England, that's out of the question. How does one get to America? So I applied to 5 hospitals, and I had 5 offers. Now I had difficulty deciding where to go. Well, I don't know how to cook, clean. So I said, I want to go somewhere where they'll cook for me. I don't want to be, and the hospitals used to have what they call full maintenance. They'll give you a room and board and food. I said, I'll be there, at least the food will be cooked, my clothes will be clean, there'll be roof over my head. I wouldn't have to worry about all those things. I had heard, my friends had heard, that Chicago gets very cold. So I had a 3-piece suit, woolen suit, and a heavy, very heavy, double-breasted woolen overcoat. So I arrived in Chicago on July 1st with those things on. And I don't know if you know Chicago, in summertime it gets very hot and humid. So I'm drenching all over, perspiring, and people are looking at me, where did this thing come from? And there wasn't much money they allowed. Pakistan allowed only $20 to get out of the country. By the time I got to my hospital, I had $5 left. It was again a new experience. I was trained in Pakistan, where the availability of access of instrumentation facilities were limited. So there were a lot of new things that I was seeing that I was not familiar with. So the first few months I looked like the dumbest guy that was there. I didn't know anything about the American system, what to do and what not to do, what was I going to do. Pakistan has a lot of need for nephrologists. Kidney problems very common, GI is very common, infectious disease very common, respiratory disease very common. And he said there's almost no neurologist there in Pakistan. So I said, I'll be a neurologist. The biggest problem came after I wrote the exams. I wrote to Pakistan. I said, I'm ready, fellas. I'm ready to come and serve the country. Then some time passed, and the Director General wrote, I'm looking, but doesn't look very promising. So I knew they didn't want me, So now I was left totally in Canada. Ontario had a law that they will not allow anyone to get a license who is graduate from Pakistan or India. That was a law at that time. So I came here in May. It's a beautiful time of the year, and the people were nice. And this is flat. In Sindh, where I grew up, is flat as Saskatchewan, absolutely flat. The sun didn't set until 9:30. I came out and it was still light. I didn't have anybody else to discuss. I wasn't married. I didn't have any close friends. So I thought to myself, I said, what am I looking for? And there was no clear answer. said, well, this is a nice place, nice people. I said, maybe I'll come for a year till I find my way.
From settling in the small agricultural city of Saskatoon in 1967 to the present day, Dr. Rajput has distinguished himself as a world leader in Parkinson's disease research. He has remained true to his early ideals of the altruistic practice of medicine and has remained dedicated to the small rural setting. He has also sacrificed the prestige of a higher income offered to a person of his caliber in a larger city.
When I decided that I was going to stay an academic, I knew the limitations of this place, and I had my own visions. What is an academic professor? I wasn't going to be like somebody practicing downtown, doing neurology practice, or I should be practicing downtown, nothing wrong with that. And I knew what the professors elsewhere do. There wasn't a tradition here, so I said, I have to establish some research. So I had made a very quiet resolution to myself. Unless I stand in the same row as the Harvard professors do, Toronto do, McGill do, I'm not staying in academic. I might as well go and make some money. But I had to find a way how to get there, and that was easier said than done.
With limited research funds, Dr. Rajput knew he had to be extremely resourceful. He knew he couldn't compete with the larger centers, able to invest in technologically advanced and costly research. Instead, Dr. Rajput decided to build an impressive clinical resource, a meticulous record of Parkinson's patients, as well as preservation of their brains for more in-depth study.
So I realized that in here, we have to build a resource. And that resource has to be unique, and that resource has to be credible. So that resource was our clinical information and onto the brains. And after publication of some papers, people said, hey, this is good. It's good, we like it. And from then on, there have been conversion, seeing that maybe slow and steady does pay off in the long run. I had to make a decision, what do I do with the resource that we have built? Does it die with I dying? Or does it disintegrate after I leave? And it didn't make any sense that I don't make any effort to keep it for the future generation. So that particular center is called Saskatchewan Center for Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders. There are 17 MDs and PhDs in that, and they are, each one of them has their own lab, so there's a huge number of people involved in that.
Dr. Rajput has dedicated his life to the betterment of all people, overlooking race, class, gender, and religious background. In 1997, Dr. Rajput received one of Canada's highest honors, Officer of the Order of Canada.
Somebody nominates you, and then they ask people around the country, what is this person like? Is he deserving of the recognition or not? I don't know who nominated me and why, and I don't know who wrote the letters, who they asked for references. I have no idea, because they don't give you that information. So they called me and they said, you know, we have chosen you for Officer of the Order of Canada. Would you accept it? I said, yes.
Each and every Canadian has something significant to offer. We see proof of this fact every day in people like Alan Okanovich, who used his experience of being a refugee as an opportunity to help children of war-torn countries. Salim Haji, who struggled to provide a hopeful future for his children. Taisir Abul Nasser, a leader in her field committed to raising standards in education. Shima Khan, a model for Canadians of conscience. And Ali Rajput, a man dedicated to a lifelong pursuit of the well-being and eventual cure of his patients. As Muslims, they share the belief that self-sacrifice and helping others is a responsibility. As Canadians, they find that their reward is nothing less than a warm welcome.